rut. It just went.
Is it bent back?
Yeah, it's got to get cut off.
You sure? If the
it's-
shaft ain't bent? Oh,
It
the
is
shaft is
yeah.
bent?
You can't.
Because I've straightened them back out, bent them back.
Yeah. I had Tobin come over and take a look at it because he's dealt with stuff like that too. He's like, if you didn't have that reinforcement, it probably wouldn't have bent that. It would have bent the structure, and you could have redone it, but no. It's toast. The good news is that people can't easily seal it. Hey, look, it's on. All right.
Okay, now we are recording and
Excellent.
All right. Thanks for your patience. We're going to call this meeting to order at 5:08. We'll start with a roll call.
Shane Martinez, District 1.
Paul Carey, District 2.
Philip King, District 3.
Todd Shearhart, District 4.
Herb Dyer, District 5, is absent, and I'm Darren Schroeder, Mayor. All right. Next, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Please remain standing for the invocation. Everyone does it.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just take a moment out of this day to pause and to fix our eyes upon you. And I know there's going to be a lot of discussion at this meeting, and Lord, there's going to be a lot of decisions made, not only at this meeting, but throughout the year. So I just pray for wisdom, Lord, for every one of these members of this council, Lord, that you would help them to work together and do what's best for the community. And I pray for their character, I pray for their integrity, and Lord, I just pray a blessing over each family that's represented. And Lord, we also just pray for this community as it grows and new families move in and move out. God, that you would continue just to build a strong foundation upon you. We ask all these things, Jesus, in your name. Amen.
Thank you. And thank you and the rest of the Pastors Alliance for praying for us on the National Day of Prayer. We appreciate you looking out for us. All right. Next, we have citizens' comments. Would anybody like to speak for citizens' comments? All right. Next item is the consent agenda. On this agenda, we have minutes for April 26, 2022, regular called council meeting, acceptance of Country Village roadway from the Gruffs, Medina Valley Youth Baseball contract, Edwards Aquifer Alliance Memorandum of Understanding for an artificial wetland project. Did everybody get a chance to read the consent agenda? Okay. All right. Do we have a motion?
I'll move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Great. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. All right. Next item is with great hope and disappointment all at the same time, happiness and sadness. The next item is consider and take action on accepting Todd Shearhart District 4 resignation.
Discussion, can we just vote it down?
Can we vote it down? Todd said no. So
Harold would be so disappointed.
I'm not sure that he would. So, Todd, I want to personally thank you for everything that you've done. I've watched you over the last few years, and you've become funnier and funnier, or more and more vocal. And I appreciate everything that you put into this, being on the airport board liaison with. I think that you don't say much, but when you say something, it's substantial, and you've mostly kept me in line. I was talking to Herb, and he said, I don't know how you're going to keep things going with me gone, with Todd gone. I think we're in trouble. But I just wanted to thank you for the time here. Would anybody else like to?
I don't like the guy. People ask me, I think this city council for the past year and longer than that, but it's a fun council. And it hadn't been a fun past, but it is a fun council, and you're part of what kept make it a fun council. And I think we do good work, hopefully. But I think we're respectful of each other, and that's the important part of you and the rest of us. So I am going to miss you.
Thank you.
It's been an honor and a pleasure, and it's been good to get to know you. I hadn't had that opportunity before. I mean, I may see you again, you know. You live behind my sister, so.
Right. Exactly.
All right. So
Thank
thank you for the years of service.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We vented to each other on frustration on some things when it was hairy.
We certainly did.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
And just kept each other sane on the council. You're venting to us and then telling us fun stories about at the ranch and everything, so.
That's what you do, always a trip to the ranch.
I do.
But
Scott was already gloating that he was the only one that got a trip to the ranch, but we'll do that. We will do that.
I'll see you when you come in the store.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm not going anywhere as yet. Y'all might see me at Citizens Comments on
Absolutely.
but with exception of Phil, and no pun intended here, but we had some tough times not too long ago, not too many years ago, and it was a struggle. It was a battle, So
Oh, yeah.
I enjoyed working with all of y'all. I think we've come a long ways, and as far as the city and as far as the council, and I hope y'all continue to do the same thing with Mr. Stein. And Phil just got on, about a year ago? Or you've been here too, Phil? I know you were here before, but
This is actually, it's the end of the second year, I think 5 years.
yeah.
So.
But I appreciate all of y'all very much. I think y'all, it's okay to disagree. We don't always agree at times, and it usually takes a lot for me to get stirred up about something. So anyway, thank y'all for your service, and I'll miss y'all guys.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Come back anytime.
Yeah, I will.
Well, I just want to say, we do have board openings. And and I do have your phone number still. I will not take it out of my phone. And
You're not getting off that easily.
And you're welcome to come in the front door or the back door.
Do I still have permission to walk into
Yes, sir.
Scott's office or Deborah's office?
Oh, you can come in my office.
No, I gotta make an appointment.
I know more what's going on.
Depends on what it's about, Todd.
But I've enjoyed it, and it's been a pleasure. And you're right, it was tough, but knowing that the
Very
council
tough.
was together on a lot of the stuff, it made it a lot easier for staff. And I thank you.
Everybody
I
here
thank
made a
you.
big difference.
You guys did.
Everybody,
May have a little less hair after all that.
including
but-
her. And
on
I
that-
just first saw the cake just now.
Yeah, we always have to have cake.
Yeah.
If I may, I'm the one that has the bet, so I have the one that, if I get too long-winded, I'm the one that's going to lose. Todd, it's been a pleasure. You're a man of high integrity. You're honest. You're thoughtful. From a staff perspective, I really appreciated the time that you took to review the issues, to really think through the policies. I like many. I think each of you have a different personality. It's not meant in any, not to degrade council at all, but it is a little bit like family or dealing with children or anything else in your life. Everybody's a little bit different, and I think that you added a lot to the equation, and you will be missed. Your thoughtfulness will be missed. I know that Mr. Stein will also bring his own personality to this group, and the group will change because of it. It'll be slightly different. That's just the way things work. But it's been a pleasure. I think easily the most important and best decision you made was hiring me, but beyond that, you did a lot of other good things. So I really, really appreciate the time we spent together and hope that it's not the end of those times, that we can continue to hang out.
I would have to agree with that. I think you've,
Oh, no, you
but
don't
the
need to.
expectations were high of you.
You don't need to swallow my ego. That was just a joke. This is about
You want me
you.
to stop so we can move on. Keep going.
All right.
No, it's been a pleasure working with everybody, staff included. John, I know I don't know if council knows, but Leroy had a birthday yesterday. Yeah,
Yep.
so
I didn't realize that.
anyway. and,
He didn't stay with Kayla.
David over in, at the airport, fantastic job, man. Arnie, everybody,
There's always Arnie.
yeah. Priscilla, thank y'all.
All right, so on this item, do I have a motion?
On that note, I would be regretfully make the motion that we accept Todd Shearhart's resignation.
And I regretfully make the second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We're going to miss you,
I
man.
don't know if I'm supposed to.
You can't leave, though, because we still have something coming up for you.
Okay.
All right. So next item is consider and take appropriate action on appointing Harold Stein to fill the open seat for District 4 for a term ending May 2023. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. Can I still make a motion?
Yes, you may.
Well, he
Well, he accepted his resignation
Yeah,
as
so
of...
now you
It's
can't
effective, but it's effective when?
today,
Yeah, it's effective at the end of the meeting today.
Okay.
Okay.
whichever.
Because he can't, because Stein can't vote today anyway, so
Well, he
yours is
can't vote
effective.
on his own
His is
anyway.
effective at the end of the day today. Let's go.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Harold Stein to fill the position of District 4 for the term ending May 2023.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Got two of them.
Who got the second?
I heard Sheena a little louder.
Sheena? All right, seconded by Councilwoman Martinez. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Welcome.
Welcome aboard, Harold.
Congratulations, and I'm sorry.
And if you get real upset, just go over and knock on his door.
All right, next, we have presentation of award for service for outgoing Councilmember Todd Shearhart, District
Again?
4.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's your day. Night.
Okay, well, we have, so this, oh, actually, can you make sure you get a picture of this? 'Cause I want to make sure that we,
It's got two sides. You're going to take a picture of both sides,
all right.
because there are messages on both sides.
What is it, a 3-minute hourglass?
Well, you didn't need one of those.
This, the clock represents our thankfulness for the time that you spent on council,
Oh,
the
cool.
time that you gave to the citizens of Castroville, to the time that you gave to each one of us. This is something,
I forgot to take a picture of one.
That's all right.
Hey, and it's keeping the right time, too. That's a good sign.
thank you for your time representing District 4 and support in shaping the future of Castroville for all citizens.
That's cool.
I'll give that to you.
I want to resign now, so I get one.
There you go.
I'll work on it.
Thank y'all, sir.
All right, next item is swearing in of Phil King, District 3, and Howard Stein, District 4.
No, not Howard.
She didn't change that.
That's all right.
I have Harold on mine.
I do, too.
Mine says
Harold, I'm
Howard.
sorry. I caught that before and I missed it now.
Yeah.
Mr. Stein, I'm just going to call you Mr. Stein.
Those two.
Yeah, mine says
I
Howard.
printed it offline.
It says Howard.
All right,
Well, I'm looking at it, it says Harold.
Yeah.
What is it?
I don't know.
so let's start with Councilman King, right over here.
That's his twin.
So we'll start with Phil, and then we'll grab you next. All right. All right.
Howard or Harold?
Harold. Howard, when he was in Las Vegas.
This is going to screw me up the whole 2 years.
Well, he has a name tag, so.
Oh, good, good. Oh, whatever we do.
Not a good thing. Yeah.
Okay,
Face-
raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Philip Gregory King, do solemnly swear
Phil Gregory King do solemnly swear
or affirm
or affirm
that I will faithfully execute the duties of City Council,
that I will faithfully execute the duties of City Council,
District 3,
District 3,
for the City of
for
Castroville,
the City of Castroville,
of the State of Texas,
State of Texas,
and will do the best of my ability to preserve,
and will do the best of my ability to preserve,
protect,
protect,
and defend the Constitution
and defend the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and laws of the United States
and of this state,
and of this state,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Sorry.
All right.
We're not going to do this over. So if you want to do it, then I'll change the name of the member. I can do it.
You want to do that one first? Okay.
Just a second. This is on the appropriate option.
Okay.
Just do this first, and then he will-
What do you need?
Yeah.
Everybody brings out a pen.
I just solemnly swear that I am not guilty of directly claim to offer, promise to pay, contribute, or promise to contribute any money or thing of value, or promise to any public office or employment as a reward to secure my appointment or confirmation thereof, so help me God.
I do.
Okay, and then here it says, you declare that you read this word on the statement, and if that's true, and if you will, be so kind as to sign it.
Today is the 10th.
Yes, sir.
Signature here.
Yes, sir. And then I'll sign off on it, and I'll get you a copy too.
He's here for the last time.
I understand all of it. The one word. There you go, that's what I like.
I was eating.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Harold W. Stein Jr.,
I, Harold W. Stein Jr.,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will faithfully execute the duties
that I will faithfully execute the duties
of City Council District 4
of City Council District 4
of the City of Castroville
for the City of Castroville
of the State of Texas,
of the State of Texas,
and will do the best of my ability to preserve,
and will do the best of my ability to preserve,
protect,
protect,
and defend the Constitution
and protect the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and laws of the United States
and of this state,
and of this state,
so help me God.
so help me God. Thank you.
You got the picture, right?
I got one.
Okay.
This goes to you. You can pressure wipe
I don't think it'll do you much good.
it. Yeah. Actually, something you can rest.
What's on the back of the?
I don't know who put that. Somebody put a milk cow back there.
I don't know. I saw that today. I think that is hilarious.
It's been there a while.
Oh, that's nice.
All right. And Deborah, as always, has put together a wonderful little spread of cake and pulling together with the clock, and she even did the MBISD colors on the city of Castroville instead of red.
I would suggest that maybe you do a recess, right? Let's do
Okay.
a recess for the,
Reception.
So we're going to take a recess for the reception at 5:25.
Wow.
do I need to pause or anything?
Pause the meeting for me? Or that's for Harold.
This is for you, man.
The recording. Yes.
Well, I guess for that. too.
Thank you, sir.
It's been a pleasure.
Harold, not Howard.
Harold.
You keep saying it's gonna make it even harder.
Like 10 minutes ago.
I know that I have a staff meeting in the morning. I would say what time is better, morning or afternoon? Because I can meet like, one sec, I can either meet at 8 a.m. or I can meet,
Actually, 10 or 15 minutes.
okay.
I just check the schedule.
Yeah. Well, we want to do some type of orientation. You, the mayor, that I have to schedule that. Probably something that looks good. That's May 31st, right? May 30th? Okay.
Thank you very much, Eric.
This is Kate and Dr. Yeah. So let's meet at 8. Oh, shoot. I was going to come in tonight at 8:15. More between 8 and 9, I'm fine, but okay. I can meet with you at like 4:30. If you want to do around 4:30, yeah, let's just plan 4:30. Because I don't know if
I got a couple things coming up.
I think that might be the more we sit down. One of the things that talked yeah, at the next meeting, we're going to appoint Mayor Pro Tem as something to do all those. And we'll also go to so something we can do which board we airport,
And I kind of assumed that I would just Todd from the airport when I'm
right. So that's what I was saying. Y'all may want to talk about that.
yeah,
Are you going to the baseball game on Friday? It's okay. No, I just felt bad because I didn't
no, thanks for letting me know, and I will let you know about
I have a couple of tickets. They're not going to go anywhere. So. Okay.
And his wife and daughter already had tried. Cleveland, Texas.
Okay, I think you said Cleveland. That's like Cleveland.
Yeah, no.
That's a drive.
Well, there's
But Cleveland's a drive.
yeah. Yeah, well, I'll go to the
Yeah, Bird's out. I thought I talked to her about it. Okay.
Absolutely. Here doesn't it itself.
Oh, okay.
That'll be a nice looking shirt. Do you want to finish our other discussion? Or?
Right now?
Oh, no, that's right. You're going to go with me tomorrow. I forgot. 2 o'clock. I will add you to the invite. Me, David, and either Mark Lehman or his fence contractor. One or the other, I told him has to be there. Hopefully they show up.
Okay.
And I'm gonna set up, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I need to come and get my calendar straight.
That way we can kind of get started.
So I'll stop by. I'm somewhere close by. Well, actually, I'll just give you a direct copy.
Don't want to do that? You don't have to.
I do, I'll try to think about that. Well, I can't. I can tell you afterwards. Because I don't remember. I know I have it. I don't know.
Bring that up.
They'll read you all. It's all good work, but it, yeah.
I'll be commercial and sell it, or build residential and sell it.
Oh, yeah, no, I was showing our meeting.
It should have paid for, and all the development paid for, just for the residential.
They got a hole in my backyard looking for my utility fence.
They're doing a really good job of hitting all of our utilities. And they're building this right on top of our utilities. So it's not gonna be able to break them. They're gonna break them.
So how deep?
I don't have a baby spoon.
I remember when they took in the old Jackson's backyard, and they had their basement, electrical. Not everything's on the backside. Supposedly, I have a AT&T line on my side of the fence that supposedly went from coast to coast, back when they built that. No, but that's where it was supposed to be. See, that's according to the signage.
They kept telling me 11:60 tomorrow.
Well, I thought it was.
Like a chief master, the chief came in, his chief, he was told him, he said, you know, it's very important because in general, we start doing work on these things. And it was during the debates in Arkansas, during this park, this big street.
Find out on the 23rd.
It's like, you know, that's the third part of the You're telling me, right here, clear day. All the staff is staying here.
So,
That was set up all my hair's done out of the base. Well, they were like, get this done, you know. So, but, being a mass. Oh, yes, I definitely we started giving them his that's where we were Saturday. I got some there, I got.
Oh, he looked at it, we're building this, I got on for sunshine. I said, yeah, I said, we're gonna see it. I said, hang on, let her know over here. I said, he's gonna heat up my side of the door.
Lights are light.
But it's brand new.
If they have, it's not Saturday, but. But I guess kind of was upset. I just started it.
They started this morning. Wow. There's none over there on the, they started this morning.
Well, there you go.
My parents had sheep.
That's where he gets his side. That's where he gets his side and everything.
I didn't want to ask her. Scott said yes. Show us what kind of
Yeah.
No, we used to. I love
Would have been
for information purposes.
All experience, professional gain.
I was thinking the vacant property is vacant property.
You know,
They have Brexit. They have Brexit at like doing all
Something called the all the different disciplines together through projects that were super bag.
Thanks for joining us. You're welcome to start voting next week.
Right.
But love to have you up here this week.
Thank you very much. I
Thanks
appreciate
again for
it.
stepping up.
Sweet. Sometimes you have to kick them, but it's got a 3-minute pass there. You gotta turn that thing on.
I think she's just riding the clock.
I am, there's ways to win.
40 minutes.
She's like 6:31, works just as well.
You have a minute and a half for each of the following items.
All right, we're going to come back from recess at, 5:52?
5:20.
Next item is City Administrator's Report.
I can win the bet.
It's gonna be quick.
Really, the question is, do you have any questions about the items? I will mention, Creekside, there was several items listed on the agenda. I do think it's worth mentioning a couple, like the airport fence project. Phil and I will be out there tomorrow at 2 o'clock to walk that with either the contractor or the farmer.
Mark Lehman.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that. The animal control, so we have about $20,000 that has gone unspent for that y'all approved for the animal control facility. We've done all the items that were needed, with the exception of, I think, the concrete work around the perimeter still needs to be done. The insulation's been installed, the AC's been installed, the shed's been installed, the new fence is installed. So we checked the list, but there's still about $20,000. It's a good thing, because later on in my report, I mentioned the new parks and streets operations site. This is something I know that a couple of you have brought to my attention in the past, that we don't like the way that it's kind of taking over a portion of the regional park, and it doesn't look very attractive. It's where our streets and parks crews maintain their equipment and park their equipment and park their trucks, etc. So we're looking at the possibility and the feasibility of moving that operation up on the hill. Now, there are some issues. TCQ may have something to say about that, because it'll be next to the wastewater treatment plant. So we may need a separate gate or something along those lines. But we are looking at that. Part of that would involve the construction of a metal building up there. We've looked at a 4-bay metal building. It's actually a 5-bay. It's 4 enclosed bays with a 5th bay that would be like a carport on the end. So it's a pretty good sized building. I think it's like 60 by 30 or 60 by 40, something like that. And that's around $20,000. We'd still need to pour a foundation and do some other things. That may not be the only thing that we need up there if we're going to move all of our operations up on the hill. So that's something that we're kind of just working through. It's in my report. There's a picture. I just want to bring that to your attention. And if you have any questions, you can contact me about it. And then 2 other items, the tourism events and business development position. We do have a meet and greet. I sent all of you an email just prior to this meeting, a few minutes before it started. Thursday night, we plan to be at the Hillside Hotel up in their barrel room. I'm still trying to confirm that we can actually do that, because they already have another event going on downstairs. And then Friday morning, we will do coffee, kolaches, and conversation at the Magnolia filling station. So you're all invited to that. I'm going to invite the EDC board, the group that interviewed the 2 candidates, and then the Chamber of Commerce board as well. So trying to cover all our bases. And then the next night, Friday night, we will have our inaugural Cashville night at Missions Baseball. So I know there's only a couple of you that are going to be able to join us that night. But we've got, I think, the last report I got from the sales agent with the team was that we had a section 206, the entire section sold out. So it's like 155 tickets. And that link was only available to us, to the public in Cashville. So I don't know who all bought those tickets, but hopefully you'll recognize some faces at the game. They'll be in section 206. We have 40 seats in section, I think, 106, which is down closer to the field. That's the ones that kind of the VIPs, if you will, the elected officials, the board members, and others, some of the employees that have responded and said they want to go to the game. That's where we'll be sitting. So the 2 candidates will go Friday night to that, and then we'll probably convene our committee either by email or in person next week to select the finalists. So any questions about the report that was delivered?
How big is this little slab you're talking about pouring at the animal control facility?
Well, it'd have to be big enough for the building.
No, the
and
animal
the
control.
Oh, the animal, it's just like
6 or 8 inches around the border. Because basically, my recollection is they moved the building, and I don't know why they didn't just pour it. I don't know what the thought process was, but it's literally just a perimeter. So what we're trying to do is get that bid as part of the work that we're having done at the library, that y'all have already approved. So it hadn't been done yet, but that's what we're going to try to do. Is when that contractor comes out to do the work for the library, we'll send them up the hill and have them do the rest of the other. It's a pretty small job.
Yeah, how about the other thing, we could give me some of your boys and I'll go and Google and do it ourselves.
You're building a roof, sir. You're putting a roof on it.
They're almost
Swing
done.
into,
Yeah, I know.
swing into the store there and buy the concrete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I
Did you say
mean,
donation?
if it's something really small, I think, I would volunteer.
Yeah, it's a pretty good sized building, but it's just that 6 or 8 inches on the perimeter that has to be.
Right.
You call it a concrete apron.
But it's not, yeah. I know you're no stranger. You could do it. I've seen what you've done. You literally built a building by hand, basically, but
Maybe we go look at that tomorrow also.
maybe.
After we do.
It's the opposite direction, and I have an hour and a half to do a bunch of things, but maybe.
Okay, well, it'd be-
Phil's just retired,
Maybe.
now he's got all kinds of time.
I know he does. I know he
I'm
does.
just going.
Todd, you had a,
I'm just, along the same lines as that Parks
Yes,
and Rec
yes,
stuff,
short timer? Go ahead.
I just can't see buying new equipment for different departments and not putting it under a cover. You know, you
Right.
may not be able to afford concrete, but at least a lean-to or a shed or something. I mean, just to get
Right.
it out of the elements, it just don't make no sense to me. Park it
But I-
under a pecan tree, that's the
Yeah.
worst tree in the world to park under.
Right. So we do, you bring up a good point. Where we are at Public Works today, all of the city vehicles, like the vehicles that people, the trucks that they drive, they're out in the open and they're under trees, right? We do have our large equipment. For the most part, our large equipment is under a barn. We do have a barn that's on the east side of that property. But there's a couple of pieces of equipment that are on the west side of the property that are not under a barn. So one of the reasons I haven't really talked a lot about that is because we really do want to move Public Works out of where they are. And I know y'all are all aware of some of the discussions we've had with developers about that, the potential of doing that. So it makes little sense to make permanent improvements to something that you think
You ain't
may
gonna
not be there in
very
3
long.
years, right? Because we hope that's the time frame. 3 to 5 years, we're looking at moving Public Works.
Well, would you put Parks and Recs with Public Works?
I don't know. Depends on what happens with that new site. There's some aspects of parks that need to be at, I mean, it's really beneficial to be at Regional Park. So
I can agree with that.
if we can develop that top of the hill, I think that's where parks will stay. Streets, on the other hand, could potentially move with Public Works, but we'll just see how all that plays out.
Is there water and all that available already up there? Are we going to have to trench in some new water pipe?
No, there is. So the site
Electrical.
they've looked at, there's electric very close by, and of course, there's water and sewer to the,
Plant there?
well, to the
Animal shelter.
animal shelter,
Okay.
so which is right next door. So the cost to extend utilities is minimal. But that'll be brought to y'all as a decision, because there's going to be, it'll require more than the leftover money from the animal control, and I'd need your permission anyway. So more than likely, and we're looking at maybe a $45,000 spend to do the whole thing, but 20 of it will recoup from the animal shelter.
all right, any other questions, comments? All right, next item. So this one, we have on here discussion on possible action on engineer's estimate, legal review, a fee assessment for improvements to the Creekside subdivision water system. So we're not going to make a decision on this today. This is going to be for discussion only. Just an update, in case anybody had missed this, the preliminary engineer's report came back at $685,000.
And that is conservative. I honestly
Conservative
think we could
estimate?
get it done for maybe 100 to 200 less.
Say that again?
I think that's conservative. I think we can get it done for around 450,000. I mean, we'd have to take it out for bid and see what the bids come back, but I would expect it to be in that range, so.
So the thing that we're working on right now is how do we fund it? What mechanisms are in place to be able to do that? I know that there's been a lot of back and forth on that, and we have some ideas for that. I don't believe that we have solidified that to the point where I'm comfortable with us making a decision on it. Would you agree?
Yeah. And I think you have the legal opinion. We couldn't share that publicly, but, you know, in essence, there is one opportunity for the city. It's kind of limited, it's limited in time frame. It's limited in participation. The city would not be allowed to participate. In other words, 100% would have to be paid by the homeowners, and they have to pay it in a fairly short period of time. And so that's probably not going to work. It's just going to be too expensive. So we're looking at other options. Another option could be a voluntary PID, the establishment of a PID by the homeowners. That has its own drawbacks. So these are things that we'll look at or continue to look at. And if we can come up with a better scenario, we'll let you know. I'll probably meet with someone at Creekside to discuss some of the things that we've identified so far.
And for anybody, I know that we have at least one from Creekside right now. The bottom line is we're looking at what the fix is going to cost, trying to keep that as minimal as possible and figure out the best funding mechanism. We had discussed a lot of this at the town hall, but we want to make sure that we're doing what's right for you guys too.
Are there any other lots to be sold, or is that filled out?
No, there's a few empty lots out there. I don't know how many, but not, probably less than 6, somewhere between 2 and 6.
This is the first time I saw the aerial view that it
There's
showed.
22 that have been developed, and there's 22 water customers out there.
But there could be some extra, some other,
Right.
Yeah, if you look at each one of,
yeah.
there's several more. I mean, it's not going to be a ton, but there's probably, what, a dozen more?
Is it a dozen?
There's 32 lots.
So there's 10 more.
10 more.
About a dozen. Okay.
So there might be 10 more.
Yeah, maybe 8 or 10 for larger lots. All right. Any questions on that?
No.
All right, next item, consider and take appropriate action on applications submitted for open positions on city boards and commissions.
Tonight, we just have one application for the library board, and Mr. Hall is here tonight to introduce himself. I met him at the Love Your Library event, and we discussed possibility of him coming on the board, and he was nice enough to fill out his application and hopefully take advantage. We can take advantage of his knowledge.
Great.
Yes, sir?
Would you please? Yeah. Love to hear about you and what your interest is and
First of all, I want to thank the council for inviting me to be considered as a library board member, I believe. I met Mr. Mayor at the library open house recently. He and his wife were there among many other faces. And that was my first exposure to library organization. A lot of the staff were there. I got to see the extent of their operations. I'm new to this area in the sense that I came to Texas about a year ago after 26 years total between military and civilian service from the East Coast, Washington, D.C. I now live at Blue Skies, which is formerly Air Force Village. And many of the residents there are plugged into a lot of the action that goes on here. So I was encouraged to kind of get involved myself. So it just happened that I attended the open house because I love libraries, I love to learn and read. And on that note, I must say that if your mom's a librarian and you grew up hearing about libraries and how important they are to everyone, from the smallest to the the seniors, then you get a little insight into how important that is. So I saw my chance once I was asked if I would be interested in joining. And I said, kind of hands down, okay, yes, they'll take me. Because I say yes, but you might say otherwise. But I look forward to the opportunity to get started and serve the community. And the library is what I'd like to start with your permission. So, is there anything else?
Great. No, thank you. I appreciate that. The one thing that we can continue to do as a community to stay as strong as possible is to volunteer, to step in and be a part of it. So I really appreciate the fact that you're willing to step up and really truly be a part of that community.
Well, no, the Air Force Village is not in city limits, correct?
No.
No.
Yeah.
It's in the school district.
Yeah, I know, but I was just going to mention, this is one of the, yes, it'd be a 2-year appointment, to answer your question. This is one of the few boards where you don't have to be in the city limits, you just have to live in MVISD, so that means you can be in Bexar County and other places. So it's an excellent board for someone such as yourself to be involved in the city, because there's limited opportunities. Anyway, just point that out and remind y'all that you don't have to be a citizen, if that was a concern.
Great. Do I have a motion?
I move to appoint excuse me, a lot. Charles Hall to the open position on the library board.
I'll second that.
Great. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Charles.
All opposed? Motion passes. Welcome. Thank you.
Welcome,
Look
thank
forward to
you.
it.
And I will get you the agenda for tomorrow night's meeting so that you can meet up.
All right, next item is consider and take appropriate action on a task order with Respec Engineering for updating the water sewer impact fees.
So I do not have Respec asked that they need to be here, and I told them they really didn't. It's probably okay. As you all may know, we're in the process of assessing our meeting the need, if you will, of the development that's coming for the water and sewer system. One of the things that you all approved staff to do is to pursue those developments in accordance with some contracts that we'll do with each of those parties. So we'll have contractual agreements, which will relieve them from the necessity or the duty to pay the impact fee. But even though the impact fees are not that old, I think they were from 2018, we all know what's happened from inflation and cost. So this is an excellent opportunity for us to reassess our impact fee and establish it at a rate that helps us recoup the cost of the expanded water and sewer systems. The developers will pay their share, but there will be some additional capacity, more than likely, certainly on the water side and possibly on the sewer side, which we cannot legally or contractually obligate them to pay. The city will have to pick up that portion. So that's what this is about. And the reason I chose Respec over K-Freeze wasn't a confidence or trust or any other issue. It was more of the fact that Respec is the one that's calculating all of the estimates and costs for the contractual agreements that we're about to enter into with those development agreements. So they're in a perfect position to do this impact fee analysis as well. I didn't want to have to pay double dip and pay another engineer to check their work and that kind of thing. So that's the reason they're being proposed. Otherwise, it would be the city's typical engineer, which is K-Freeze. Are there any questions about that? It won't take too long for them to do. There is a legal process for establishing impact fees, and they will walk us through that. I'll be honest, I'm not prepared to answer those questions tonight, but there is a statutory process that they have to go through to establish new impact fees, and it boils down to what they're doing now, which is an estimation of the cost of expansion of the water and sewer systems to meet future need.
And to be clear, for those people that don't fully understand what the impact fees are about, it is when there's new connections being put in by new development, it's assessing a fee that looks at the impact of the wider system. And to Scott's point, even through the development agreements that we have, we can't recoup that through other means, and so this is really a way to make sure that this new development is paying for itself and that we're not burdening the people that are here with that additional impact of having to deal with that.
Question?
Discussion.
And if I remember last time, we have to form a board to review inside and outside people, if I remember right, to evaluate the impact fees from the engineers and approve those.
We already have a impact fee committee, and
Okay.
it's made up of the 5 full board members of the planning and zoning.
Okay, and then there was one outside person.
There's 2.
Okay.
One, I believe, is Mr. Hart, and I forgot the other gentleman's name. He lives up on the hill, but they're
Okay.
part of it. Yes,
Jimmy
yes.
Mullins? No.
Maybe. I can't remember. It's been
That's
so
fine.
long. But
If you
yes.
if you can get a list of who's on that board and whether or not there's an opportunity to appoint anybody new in case the council wants to do that. But
No.
at the very minimum, I want to get that to Person.
So that board's already in existence?
Yes,
That's
it's
what I
in
was asking.
existence, and each time they have a full board position that comes on for 2 years, it automatically goes over to that board because it's the 5 full board members. Plus, like you said, a representative for the real estate, which we'll have to ask Mr. Hart if he still wants to do that. And then also the other gentleman, he's in the county, is why. It's a county rep.
Understand. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions?
No,
Do you have a motion?
I didn't think we were taking action on this.
Oh, it's the
Yeah,
task
you are.
order.
Oh,
You're approved, the cost is $25,000
I
or thereabouts.
would like to make a motion for the city to authorize task order with respect for updating the water sewage impact fee. Oh, recommended motion, I move to authorize task force number 14 with respect as outlined in the proposal.
Second.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
You
Motion
get that one,
passes.
Deborah?
Yes, sir.
Nicely done. All right, next item. Consider and take appropriate action on awarding a recruitment services contract for the police chief search.
This also has a recommended motion, but you have to fill in the blank. So I don't know if you need to speak to this. There's 3 proposals. You have a proposal from Baker Tilly. They're a national, they typically do like private industry searches, but they have gotten more into the municipal space. They have placed a number of city managers and police chiefs, certainly nationally, but there's a few in Texas they've done as well. Of course, SGR you're familiar with. That's Strategic Government Resources. That's who you use to fill the city administrator position. And then the third one is Max, and I'm trying to remember his partner's name, who are with the Texas Police Chiefs Association, but they have their entity, their search firm entity goes by a different name. They've each kind of put together proposals. This isn't a cost-based, decision. It's based on who you don't have. In other words, sometimes by state law you have to choose the lowest bid. This is not one of those cases. But there is a range in costs. The SGR and Baker Tilly are kind of in the same range. They're that $25,000 range. It's what they estimate the total cost to be. And the Texas Police Chiefs Association is considerably cheaper. It's around $10,000. It's actually a little bit less than that. I think it's around $8,000.
And then the other ones also have the addition of our interim police chief, the fees for that. Is that correct? I believe that you said something about...
No. We would owe, if we did not choose Max and his partner to help us with the search, we would owe them, I think it's $1,000. It's either $1,000 or $1,500. It is in their proposal.
Okay.
So we'd have to pay that in addition to whatever we paid the one of the other firms.
Okay. And based on your experience, what do you recommend on this?
I didn't give you a recommendation, sir, for this reason, because I think any one of them would do a good job. I think any one of them would do a good job. I don't think you can go wrong if you choose any one of these 3 folks.
So the police officers one.
Police chiefs.
Police chief, so it's called the police chief. So
Well, it's actually, that's the way I think they were introduced to me by the attorney who was helping us through that last process, but they actually have a different name on their, Public Safety Solutions, that's what I was trying to find. So they actually go by Public Safety Solutions, so we probably ought to refer to it. I don't want there to be libel.
And so when I look at the known entities, so SGR, we had great results. Obviously, you're a product of the results that we had with that.
So results.
Yeah, we still like them.
We have a warranty.
But then, what's that?
We have a warranty on it.
We got a warranty.
It was good for a year.
You have an
Hopefully
insurance
done.
policy.
That's right.
It expired.
But Public Safety Solutions, you said you've used them before?
I have not used them before.
But it's
and I
pretty
haven't used
standard
Baker
for-
Tilly, but I'm aware of their placements. I mean, they've got, obviously, they focus very heavily on public safety, and specifically on police. So they've got a lot of really strong contacts among the police chiefs in Texas. And so I would think, I mean, really, if I were in your shoes, I would want to know who has the best potential of bringing us a candidate. And what is the nature of the search that I want to do? Is it a national search, or is it really more of a statewide search? If it's a statewide search, then the Public Safety Solutions is as good a choice as any other, because they're gonna have contacts in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how far their reach goes beyond Texas. If you really wanted to open this up to a national-wide search, then I would recommend one of the other 2 firms, because they have more of a national presence. Baker Tilly more so than SGR, although SGR has grown considerably over the last 2 or 3 years, where they're doing a lot of stuff out of state. I think they easily have the largest market share in Texas for municipal searches. They've kind of put themselves in that position. They're not the only one, but they've really kind of built that market share over the last couple of years, or last 5 or 10.
And the public safety solutions, that's the one that's roughly about 10,000.
Yes, they're the cheapest option. They're about half the cost of or less than half the cost of the other two. But again, I think it boils down to
And you said that they're strongest in the statewide.
Yeah, they definitely have a very strong connections throughout the state, and specifically the police chiefs. The real issue is, do you want to look beyond Texas or not?
And I really think that, Texas it's pretty, it's pretty big. And it's got,
Really?
I think we got a decent pool, but it's also got a different spirit than a lot of the other states. And I think that we would be remiss to open it up beyond that if we had such a large pool of people to go through in this state. I'm a very proud Texan, and I think that that's something that is important. And I think that it's, especially if they're the least expensive, they're very strong in Texas. I don't see another option with that.
Can I make a motion?
Absolutely.
Okay, can I make a comment
More
real quick?
discussion, yes.
I like public safety solutions too, because look at everything going on in the border right now. And Texas police chiefs would know who they have to call, get those, they have those contacts, like you were saying. And, I mean, we have the high-speed chases coming through all the time now here lately with all the illegals, so it's good to have someone that understands what we're going through.
Well, for the benefit of anybody watching or listening, Public Safety Solution is who placed our current interim. So when we were going through the issues with our prior chief, they were recommended to us as someone that could help us out. And within literally like 2 days, they had 3 candidates for us. And we ended up choosing James Kohler, to be our interim, and he's done, I think, a phenomenal job, and really has got up to speed. And so I would certainly hope, and if that's what they can bring to us on an interim basis, I would certainly hope that in a permanent search they could do something even better. But again, I don't want to I don't want to taint this one way or the other. I've got good friends that work for SGR, and I like them a lot and respect them. I think it really boils down to who you're all comfortable with, and it looks like you have a motion. So.
I'd like to make a motion to move forward to award the proposal for police chief recruitment services to Public Safety Solutions.
Second.
Great. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Great. This is a very important search. Thank you for taking that seriously. Thank you for
And I like
getting that
that
RFP going.
our current.
You're doing a good job.
Right.
All right, next item, consider and take appropriate action on approving the purchase of 3 replacement vehicles shown in the adopted CIP for the Public Works Department. Now, something I want to make sure that you've noticed, I think that staff did a great job of putting this together so that you understand exactly where that was in the CIP, what they're going to be used for, what it's replacing. I think that they've done a really great job. I'm going to just make a quick comment on I think that going forward, as long as we're providing that level of detail on something that we've already approved in the CIP, if council would be willing to put those onto a consent agenda so that we can continue to move things along, if it's already been gone through that, we should probably consider that. We'll discuss that in the budget meetings coming up, though. So, John, please.
No, he was just saying. Well, honestly, if you have any questions for John, I think.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
You did a great job of putting it together, and I think that you really went above and beyond, and that kind of information is so helpful in being able to understand. I mean, the biggest fear I think that anybody has here is that we're wasting money. We take that really, really seriously. We want to make sure that the things that we're purchasing, we want to make sure that you got the tools that you need, and we want to make sure that we're spending money wisely. We're stewards of that funding, and I know that you know what you're doing with this, and I know that you've got a really solid plan, and providing this level of detail just gives us a lot more confidence that we are approving things that really make a difference in the city.
Thank you. I'm not going to take all of it. David helped me do some of the legwork in correlation with, he wants us to get departments working together, helping each other when they can. And that was one area David came and asked me, hey, is there anything I can help you with? And I said, you know what, I do have something. and actually, I did start doing this kind of work like in early October, trying to get prices, quotes from dealers, and they're saying, you know, we're not even taking any orders right now. There's not even, you're good luck with that. So I did the first quarter, and here we are coming on the second quarter, and they were saying, we typically like buy stuff on the buy board, as you know, or Source Road, one of the co-op programs, and them too were saying, we can try and order the equipment for you, but it's highly unlikely. You're still going to be waiting 4 to 6 months, and possibly even until next year, even if we get you something ordered, and it's also likely it's going to increase, so you're going to have to go back and probably ask for a budget amendment if we get you something in 2023. So this is, I guess, numbers that we've got, and we're going to replace vehicles that have gone beyond the 10 years or the 100,000 miles that we tried back 3 years ago to start implementing that program for all our fleet, not just Public Works. But we're purposing some of these if we can, we'll try and do that. Scott has talked to us that possibly there's other areas that could, maybe that's why David was helping me out. He wants some of these cuts.
Well, I'd like the utility system to buy, like, the utility system can afford to do fleet replacement on a more frequent schedule than the general fund. That's just a fact. It doesn't mean that they're flush or anything like that, but they can, whereas we might only be able to afford to replace them every 15 years, they can afford to replace them on a 10-year cycle.
Also
So
like
we're
to
gonna
work when we need it.
We're going to push them down into the general fund, whether that's parks or streets or airport or somewhere else in the organization, if they still have useful life in them, and they aren't costing us a ton of maintenance.
Two of these vehicles, with the ones with the utility beds that are 4x4, one of them's going to go in the electrical department, and the other one's going to go in the water department, which will be pulling tools, carrying load tools, and pulling trailers or even the vacuum unit where we locate our own lines or other utility lines for regular maintenance. The 1/2-ton truck is a Dodge 4x4 for our inspector, because right now he's driving it's a smaller, lower vehicle. He's having trouble going in with some of that new construction, curbs and stuff, so he's told me he's been getting stuck and he's embarrassed out there.
Can you come push me?
So he has to walk through the mud and stuff like that. But that's gonna be for him. Hopefully he'll be able to.
Well, and we're going to the AMI process, so it makes sense to pick that position up to pick up anyway, because it'll be more of a utility vehicle. Whereas now it's really a meter reading position. In the future, it's going to be a meter replacement and a catch-all. So having a pickup, I think, will be really helpful.
Are we going to put a topper on the bed of the truck to cover the equipment and everything that'll be in the bed for the inspector? You know, the cab, I call it a topper over the,
It's got a utility bed on it.
no, the 1/2-ton for the,
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that would-
Yeah, that
was-
No, I think that would probably come later on.
Okay.
Because it's not needed right now.
right,
But in the future, obviously, we
If we need to lock it.
don't want to
Okay.
be
yeah,
giving
secure
away
it and keep it from getting,
5-finger gifts.
yeah. Okay.
Can I point one other thing out, John? So something else, I know you were talking about earlier about the vehicles. We've placed a number of vehicles on order. We still have one that we ordered a year ago.
That's right.
We aren't going to get anytime soon.
No.
They can't even tell us when they're going to give it to us. And we're going to have all 3 of these
And that's
as soon as you say yes, right? I mean, they're available.
Was that
Well, a couple of months ago, we got a
What?
cop, one of our vehicles.
Yeah, the other ones,
finally.
yes.
Oh, wow.
A couple of months ago, we got one of our police vehicles that had
Yeah, it
been
was like a
ordered
confirm-
forever and a day.
So I really do, I mean, I know you still have to fly in your airplane and your head's got to fit in that cockpit, but I mean, it really, kudos to David for thinking outside the box and finding us stuff that would work, because it meets our need. And frankly, if we followed our normal kind of ordering process, we wouldn't have these trucks for another year. We're going to have these before we get the next, we've already got 4 vehicles, I think it's 4 vehicles on order that haven't been delivered. And we'll have all 3 of these before those come in.
And under budget.
And $30,000 under budget for each vehicle, more or less.
Some savings.
Sorry. Still just under.
So the pickup that it's replacing will just sit for a while, or what are you planning to use it? Because it says it's not going to replace. The truck he is currently using is a smaller truck. What's going to happen with it?
It's a car.
Yeah, he's doing a little truck.
Oh, okay.
We're going to give that one to the meter reader right now.
Okay, so the meter reader's going to use it.
Because right now he's using that smart car.
The little car.
It's not real smart.
Is that the one he shares with Carl, or is that a separate?
No, Curl has one, I think he has, does he have a separate one from the one Curl drives?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have there's a couple different things that may happen. We'll add that tourism position. No car's gonna go to waste, I promise you that.
Yeah, I just didn't know where that truck was going.
Yeah. It's not a truck, it's a car, that's what I'm saying.
No, it's a truck.
Small
No.
truck.
For the inspector.
The inspector's using a small truck now.
Oh, the inspector is. I'm sorry. Forget what I just said.
But the
Yeah.
meter reader.
So where's the inspector's truck going?
To the meter reader.
It's the meter reader. Got it.
And the meter reader car.
That's the question I asked.
Sorry.
Where was that truck going?
I misunderstood. You were correct in asking that question.
So I think the motion here is to purchase 2 3/4-ton utility bed trucks and 1 half-ton truck from local Nile Maxwell Ram dealership for an amount not to exceed $215,000 total.
So moved.
Each for the 3/4-ton 4x4s, and,
I heard you.
You had a motion from Mr. Terry, just to,
oh, go ahead.
I said so moved.
Great.
There you go.
Do I have a second?
There you
All
go.
right, any discussion on that? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
I'm
Rephrase
going to
that.
point one other thing out. I only ask that our directors be here. They can be here anytime they want. I really don't require them if they have something on the agenda. I think in the over a year that I've been here, almost year and a half, John's only missed like 3 meetings. Just because you've had something on the agenda just about every single time.
You were sick.
And he always,
Yeah, he was
Thanks,
sick with
John.
COVID a couple times.
yeah.
Yeah, stay away when you got that. All right, next item is discussion on workshop design criteria for the city to move toward a unified development code.
It's Bryce.
All right, so I will be paying her $5. That's okay.
I was gonna say, you kind of tied my hands.
You got 30 seconds, man, go.
You're good, Bryce. Let me get you started up here.
Perfect. Give us just a moment. I've got a PowerPoint to help hopefully keep us slightly organized. Well, I was getting that going. I'll go ahead and introduce myself.
It should be.
I'm Bryce Cox. I'm with Denton, Navarro, Roach, Bernal, and Zech, the city's legal counsel. I'm not an attorney, though. I'm a city planner. I work for the firm and help out all of our clients with any planning and development questions, concerns, complex, difficult problems, all that fun stuff gets funneled down to me. I get to give the policy arm of our firm, right? The attorneys always just give legal advice. I get to give you the actual fun things of like, hey, what should we do with these developments, or what should we do with this stuff? So with that, I do have a lot of experience. Most of my experience is spent working as staff for various cities of different sizes, from cities as big as 60,000 down to about 4.5. And since I've been with the firm, I've been with the firm now for about 8 months. I've worked with a lot of cities, seen a lot.
They said that
Really fast.
she said she might hire another person because you've been
Yeah,
so
we are.
popular.
We're looking to expand here shortly, so it's really great. It's going really, really well. I'm really excited about it because I'm passionate for planning, and I love helping small communities because unfortunately that's where big bad developer typically comes to take advantage of situations, and so it's always good to have that information and have some help there. So. In visiting with Scott, we've kind of put together a little bit this evening to just go over a little bit about a unified development code, kind of what that is, some additional information about what it takes to kind of get that process started and what you should expect out of it, as well as some questions and some workshop items that I want some interaction and discussion about design standards, specifically towards some of the troubled development or development items that you have. So the first thing that we'll start with is a unified development code. So right now you've got a series of codified ordinances with different pieces and different requirements for development in different locations, right? So we've got a subdivision ordinance, we've got a zoning ordinance, we've got a vegetation ordinance. Different things are in different places. A unified development code at its root is a framework and a format to take all of those things that are development related and put them all into one cohesive document. Okay, so you don't have to look in a whole bunch of different places necessarily. It's all together. So that's going to include all of your procedures, all of the legalese pieces that have to be in the code, and then all of your hard required coded requirements. So your zoning districts, your lot dimension charts, your setbacks, your street layout patterns, any of the required subdivision elements that we have, such as dead-end streets or cul-de-sac widths, a bunch of things we'll probably be talking about this evening. So it's all in one place, and this, from my experience working in both cities with Unified Development Ordinance, Unified Development Code, which is also known as Unified Development Ordinance as well. Same thing, just different names. So between that and also using codified ordinances, I will say that generally there is less missed by both developers, so their professional staff that looks through ordinances, as well as staff themselves when they're going back through and reviewing. Because you've got to remember these documents are several hundred pages long. Unfortunately, as familiar as your staff is going to be with it, they don't know all of it all of the time. And so it really helps to kind of pull all that together. One of the big important pieces in looking at doing Unified Development Code is that it's got clear, concise language. Right? I always use a check in my teams where I say, hey, if there's three of us and we all read the same thing, we should all have roughly the same interpretation, not three different interpretations. And if we do, then you go back to the drawing board and figure it out. Also, the use of graphics and diagrams really helps, right? It's that show me piece to development that goes with all of the coded words. And so those things are all important in Unified Development Code. And it's probably the most useful for communities that are experiencing rapid growth. I know from talking with Scott, I'll have a lot of periphery development in the ETJ, a lot of residential development coming in the next couple of years. So we're looking at some big population moves that are going to happen.
Well, again, we talked about this in the executive session the other day, and we talked about the need to have this design. So that's why we're having this discussion. The mayor approved it. If you get upset at him.
I threw you under the bus.
Yeah, I know.
You know, I'll accept that. If you had the opportunity, you've got, you live in a house with a bunch of lots around you, and if you have the ability to say, hey, this is what my new neighbors who are moving in here are going to be able to do, and what they're not going to be able to do, it gives you control over that. And that's really what we're doing, is saying, hey, our new neighbors in the empty lots next to us in the city, these are the things you can't do, and these are the things we want you to do.
Control is comfort to know,
Well,
you know the rules, they know the rules, and we're going to abide by them. Yeah.
To be very clear, the city has had a schizophrenic relationship with itself
Yes.
when it comes to code. We've had a past where it's good for thee, or it's good for me, but not for thee kind of approach, meaning, what we say that we want and what we say we will allow are two different things. If we want them for ourselves, well, a tree preservation ordinance is great for somebody else. As long as it's not for me, as long as it doesn't affect me, then that's fine. And I'm not disparaging anyone or any process, because that's the challenge of making good policy, is finding the temperament, if you will, where people's true feelings lie. What are your true values? And that's what this process does. But one of the reasons that we're having this discussion tonight is because the more that Clay and I talk to you all about kind of what the standards were for the new developers, the more I realize there is a huge disparity between what we're requiring for the new developers and what we require for ourselves. And that's not only a concern for kind of who we are and what we value, and helping me understand that, because that's really important as someone who deals with the day-to-day, what are the city's values for code enforcement, but also it could become a legal issue. And Bryce already said he's not an attorney, so I won't put him on the spot about that. But it can become an issue and a challenge if you're enforcing different things for different people. So this, it became more and more apparent it was necessary, and I'm glad we're having the discussion. But that's part of the purpose, is to kind of understand, okay, what is it that we're comfortable living with, and what standards we want, not just outside, for these development agreements. It's nice that we have that tool, but what kind of thing do we want to do for the rest of the city as it grows, as lots become redeveloped, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. And kind of building on that, as we look at Unified Development Code, kind of the root of it is rewriting and understanding those pieces of the city's development, right? Your development regulations. What do you want the community to look like in the future? We'll talk a little bit more about some continuums and understanding the impacts of our decisions, because they're very far-reaching, and it's very easy for councils to have kind of knee-jerk reactions to development they don't like and say, let's lock this up, we never want that to happen again, without realizing that by doing that you're also keeping a lot of good things out that you may not think through. And so we'll talk a little bit about how to think through development in a moment. So some of the hurdles, obviously, with Unified Development Codes are they're slow and they can be expensive. So they oftentimes require a lot of community input, right? Because we're creating regulations for the community, for both existing residents and business owners, property owners, as well as future residents, businesses, and property owners. And so that's a really big process. And so it does take time. Typically, the fastest that I've kind of seen these go through is about 9 months, and that's on a pretty accelerated schedule. It's a hard piece for y'all. I'm going to be very upfront with this because one of the big pieces on this is that there's broad policy determinations that will have to be decided through this process to provide guidance. And so that's kind of saying, hey, community, we're listening, we're participating. This is what I think we're hearing, right? And unfortunately, being the political arm of the city, I mean, that's a tough hot seat for you. You're going to be unpopular with certain people and popular with others, because on almost every issue, we're going to have the extremes. We're going to have somebody who says, yeah, I want that, and somebody else who says, no, that doesn't belong in our community. It doesn't really matter what it is, you'll have it.
It doesn't matter.
You can't,
It can be the craziest thing.
you can't please everybody.
Exactly. And so, the last thing is that the gathering input, preparing, drafting, and adopting the final document does require a lot of cooperation. So y'all probably already know where some of those push-pulls in the community are, or those groups that don't always get along. This is a meeting of the minds, right? At the end of the day, we've got to come up with something that at least works for the majority, and not everybody's going to be happy. So just know going into it, it is kind of a political issue, and will come with a lot of commentary from your constituents as we work through it, if you'll go this route. So a couple of the just common elements that are in a UDC, it includes things like procedure, so all of the platting and subdivision, zoning, variances, appeals, all that fun stuff. Your traditional subdivision regulations get carried over into it, as do your zoning regulations.
I'm sorry, are you on slide 3?
Sorry, 2.
You're on
Yep,
slide
this
two?
side, this is right.
I'd already
No,
moved you
you-
past. What?
Next one.
That one.
We're there right there.
All right, I'd already gone past that one.
No worries. We'll get there real quick. So the other ones is you can do a lot of site design pieces, right? So under the context of zoning, there's a lot of things in the built environment on the private land that we can control. So things that are very common are things like parking, landscaping, screening and buffering, lighting, signs, parkland dedications, especially for residential subdivisions. Most of those things that you probably either are already regulating or you've seen other communities regulate can be done. Floodplain management oftentimes gets rolled into this because that's a really vital piece of development. As does stormwater management. Again, these things all kind of run together with new development. Building code and permits, those processes can also be put in there. So it's the authorization of what model codes you're using, what local amendments you have, all of that can all go together along with the authorization to issue permits out of the model code. And then kind of a bunch of other development regulations and some miscellaneous pieces that are probably tucked away in some random spots in your code that you only know from dealing with the city or your staff. It's like, oh yeah, be aware that we've got this weird piece over here that's going to be applying to you that we're not quite sure why it's there, but that, hey, that's where it is. So all of those things get pulled together. And there's two basic approaches to this. The first one is if you've got a community comprehensive plan that the community's happy with, the council's happy with, that you're following, and say we're committed to this vision, then there's less public engagement needed because we do what's called coding the comp plan, and so we more or less write your regulations to fit the framework of your comprehensive plan to create that vision. All too often have I come into communities who have lovely downtowns and older areas like y'all do, who say, yeah, this is our favorite part of town. And then you look at their code and I'm like, none of your zoning districts let you build this anywhere. So it's kind of funny that those things happen.
Well, and sometimes they don't preserve them either. So,
Oh, they don't, absolutely.
Yeah, so you have both sides of that coin. Sometimes you have something you love, but you haven't adequately protected it from future development. And sometimes you have something that you love, but you haven't adequately allowed for it to be replicated.
Yes.
And I think that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's kind of understanding that. And so as we look through the coding the comprehensive plan, again, the most important piece of that is that you're happy with the plan that you've got, or we've updated it, right? A lot of times you can run these things in tandem of doing a minor update or a major update to your comprehensive plan and then coding it on the back end. Let you double dip on the financial pieces the mayor mentioned earlier. Totally appreciate in working in municipal government how to make that dollar stretch as far as we can and account for all of them. And so one of the pieces, if you look at updating your comp plan, if you're not happy with it, the public engagement piece to that, where we're asking the public about a variety of things, that you can always double dip on that. And so we can ask both of those things as we go through it. The other opportunities, if you're not as happy with your comprehensive plan, is to do a community-informed code update, which we're basically taking all of that effort that was done or is traditionally done for a comprehensive plan and community outreach, workshops, things like that, and we're turning it into coding and talking to people about, in very layman's terms and not super regulatory language, hey, how do we want the built environment to look? Where should people's houses be? What does that actually look like? There's a lot of pictures that are shown, a lot of things that are used as visual comparisons to really understand those elements. One of the important pieces that I think for y'all's community, if you look at doing this as well, is kind of coding out a lot of the city, because you've got these built standards that already exist in your community with existing block links and setbacks from buildings in the older areas. And you can start to replicate those into zoning districts so that it encourages those styles of development to continue to be perpetuated. And a lot of times you'll end up kind of winning out with that against kind of the out-of-town developer who comes in and says, well, I don't really care what you want to do or what the land looks like, this is the plan that's going down. They don't like those kinds of codes as much, whereas locals and folks building out of the community to give that local flavor and really enhancing that piece do much better with a little bit more flexibility in those kinds of codes.
Well, I will tell you, given their druthers, developers would rather have more stringent requirements that are clearly understood and clearly communicated than a hodgepodge of requirements that may be a lot looser, but very difficult to understand and difficult to interpret.
Yes.
So, and I've heard that directly from multiple developers. They'd rather just please tell me this is the end of the story, rather than facing the unknown and then maybe having to come and kind of kiss the ring and bow before the council to please them just exactly the right way. If the council could do the work ahead of time, say, this is what we want, this is what we don't want, even if it's not something the developer really likes, at least they know the ground they stand on.
They do.
The most frustrating part for the public is not really knowing what to expect and what the outcome is, especially when you're spending a lot of money with engineers and others that are buying land.
And there's a lot of due diligence that goes into that. And so there's certain processes that we'll always recommend. Yeah, you want that discretion. We want it to come to council. Zoning, for example, always comes to council, always should. It's a policy-based decision. Versus things like, commercial site planning or other pieces where it's, hey, if you meet all the regulations, it's an administrative approval, similar to building permits. And that way you get that clear, concise piece for folks to look at. Do you have any questions about Unified Development Codes, Unified Development Ordinances, anything like that before we move on to design standards?
Okay.
About 1 million, but I think you're covering it really well, yeah.
So if you'll kick me forward a slide. Before I go too far into design standards, I just want to say the way that I look at development after years of doing this is anytime we look at regulations, I like to think of it on a continuum. And I've got extremes at both ends, and there's probably something beyond the extremes as well. And y'all's role ultimately is figure out in these continuums with these extremes, where does the city fall? Doesn't have to be in the middle. It can be at an extreme, doesn't matter, but understand that whenever we place ourselves and whenever we pick that spot on that continuum, there's a consequence to that. Good consequence, bad consequence, probably both. And so it's understanding those decisions. And as we start talking through the design elements, I'll kind of bring up some of those pieces as we have that conversation, just to help you think through, oh, I didn't think of that, or maybe you already did in your head at me. So with that, if you'll bump me forward, perfect. I'd love to hear what, I've heard from staff and Scott a little bit on some of the issues that we're having in the community, but I'd love to hear it straight from council about what problems with, back me up one. What problems with development are we experiencing right now? What concerns do you have? What are you afraid that's going to happen in the future that you see on the horizon that you want to avoid? What do those things just generally look like?
Too many houses per acre.
Okay.
So too much density.
We have a current code that says that the minimum lot size is 12,000 square feet.
Is that too big or too small?
I don't think that's. I think it's what was here, so it was codified. In our development agreement with the current developer that's underway just outside of town or just within town now, we allowed for a variety of lot sizes, all of which are smaller than 12,000 square feet. That's not sitting well with some of our citizens, very much so. But I don't see that and in fact, I don't believe that legally we can enforce the 12,000 square foot minimum lot size.
I can't attest to the legal portion, but
I know it has been challenged.
One of the things in communities that you can do with zoning is you can set lot dimensions based per zoning district, because that's the way y'all are set up. There's not a problem with that. So, as to what size is appropriate, again, that's ultimately up to council to figure out on that continuum. Maybe the answer is there's a variety of lot sizes, and it kind of depends on where you're at in the community.
I think the way that I've stated it before was that the biggest concern is that all new development takes away, there's a cost to our quality of life. The people who have been here much longer than me, much longer than, well, anybody but Todd. Well, I mean, it ranges from people that have been here for just a couple of years to people whose ancestors came from Alsace. But you have people that are already here and they've moved here because it's a rural environment, because of the community, because of the assets that we have, and that's all changing. And I think that the biggest thing is that we want to make sure that the people that come here, for every detractor, add something to it. I think Bradford said it really well. He said, historically, the founding families had pushed back on outsiders coming in because the people who came here first, they worked and they sweated and they died and they built and they really were invested, and they didn't want somebody to come in and just enjoy everything that they had built without having any kind of investment into it. And so I think that the best way to look at this is, how do we make sure that the people that are coming in don't, for everything that they take away, they add something back, and figure out how to keep them from taking away as much as possible. And some of the items that have come up is, good farmland, having wide open spaces, having more of a community feel. And there's some other things that have come up with that, but I think that to me is the bottom line.
Yeah, the whole thing about when the discussion comes up with lot size, I think it's people's perception is that if you have the larger lots, they're going to have a nicer developments. But in reality, the size of the lot doesn't dictate the quality of the development, because you can look at other towns, big and small, and you can have some very expensive little bitty houses. Our daughter lives in a little 3-story house that's about the size of this room. And it probably was, well over $500,000. And so I've come to realize that the size, because some people don't want yards. My mom lived in a Pulte neighborhood, very small lots, nice, very nice house. They had three price ranges of houses in that Pulte neighborhood. This is Del Webb. So I realized, some people don't want big lots to mow. They want little lots. And so I think the idea is we need to have a lot of discussion, and because if we just open the doors, then we're going to have some very problematic neighborhoods, which I've seen. I mean, we can drive between here and San Antonio and see neighborhoods that I wouldn't want those to be next door to me. And that's what really is, you're preserving peace in your neighborhood, and you do want quality in your neighborhood. And so those are really the discussions in my mind.
Absolutely. Anything else?
Yes.
I think we need to come up with something in between.
Well, I know we focus a lot on lot sizes. The initial question is kind of what are some of the concerns, and I'm really disappointed in you, Mayor, because transportation, that didn't get mentioned, but
Well, that is,
I know
that's
we
a
were
part of it.
focusing.
That's something that is a detractor when new people come in. That's part of it.
But just listening to you, I know that's one of the major concerns of council is, what impact is the growth going to have on the rest of the community, and how is that going to affect, commute times and things like traffic and transportation and that kind of thing, and overcrowding in schools, and I mean, just all the things that have made this community a place that people call home. How will adding double the number of people change that? And one of the things that I think we've communicated, and I think bears repeating again for anybody listening or watching, is that growth will happen. And that's the unfortunate truth. And I say unfortunate because to the extent that you really like Castroville and you like the size and you like the rural feel of it, we're going to grow. As long as people keep selling land, people are going to develop that land. And the city's ability to control that really is limited. And it's limited to whether or not we can enforce annexation and impose our subdivision regs on those developers. And in some cases, we will be able to, in limited cases where they're in the ETJ and we've got reciprocal agreements and we're allowed to do that under general law. But in many, many cases, we won't, unless we kind of are willing to bargain and willing to figure out, okay, what are the areas we value and want to hold to, and what are the areas that we're willing to concede.
Some things you can't negotiate on, though.
Right,
Sure.
and that's what this boils down to, I think. Yes.
One just small example of that is a cul-de-sac. You want a school bus to go into a cul-de-sac? You better build it over 100 foot.
Yeah.
Because you know there's going to be cars parked around it to begin with, so now we already made it smaller. And developers don't like that. That's wasted space in their opinion. In my opinion.
The whole public right-of-ways, half the public right-of-ways probably wasted space in their opinion.
I'm telling you, you go into Country Village, the cul-de-sacs are not designed for a school bus to turn around in.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that a school district says, we're not going in there. Kids all got to walk out to the intersection. Sometimes that intersection might be 2/10 of a mile.
Yeah.
Well, so
And kids don't like to walk nowadays, most of them.
So we've cheated a little bit because I did give Bryce some of the things that you all had already given to me as a short list of your concerns. And so you'll see,
There you go.
look, why
Smack in the
cul-de-sacs,
middle.
number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down the list.
And I think it's got about 100 feet on either side.
Yeah, and I've incorporated all of these into our design standards. But you've hit kind of the nail on the head about what we want to cover next, which is where are those push points? That's what Scott needs a bit, is understanding where is it. Hey, come back to us, visit with us, versus nope, somebody wants to come in and push us around, or we're going to strong arm them and tell them this is the way that it's going to be. And starting to identify those pieces, because not everything's always important. And some of the things that we find extremely important aren't going to phase developers, right? So cul-de-sac widths, as long as we're not crazy excess 250-foot radius, yeah, you may get a little bit of grumble, but it's the cost of doing business. The answer in the reality is maybe they shouldn't put in a cul-de-sac and redesign to be a grid or something like that that's a bit more walkable, checks off a couple more boxes on that list.
That's one of the reasons I really like forced ranking exercises, where it really forces you to say, okay, if I had to force these into my top 10, how would that work? Unfortunately, the people in front of you are way too smart for that, because I know I know our mayor for a fact, when we did that in our CIP, he looked at the results and he's like, okay, didn't really force rank it. He just wanted to make sure that we got the outcome that he was looking to get. So people have a way of doing that, and I know how that happens. Public meetings do that too. People get in these little groups and they'll talk and like, oh, what's your rank? All right, well, we want to make sure this makes it the top, and they'll go work it. But that really, on an individual basis, force ranking, whether it's in this subject or just something else in life, it really does help you kind of narrow down your priorities and focus on, well, what are my values? What can I live with? What can I not? And it helps me, as you were just saying, to have not just you all, but our P&Z board, and then the public as well, go through that process to better understand, okay, what is it we really and truly value? And then, what are those other values we'd like to see but are not hills that we're going to die on?
And there may be stuff on your current code that you look through and it's been keeping back certain styles of development or certain things that you look at and be like, wait a second, Why we even have that on there? Doesn't even make sense. Maybe it made sense 20 years ago, doesn't make sense today. And so one of the other pieces I'll give you is development regulations are living codes. And I say that meaning that the best job you ever do is you get it done well the first time, and then you do regular maintenance, just like your car. If you stop changing the oil and then expect that check engine light not to come on, I don't know what you've been driving for years. And so we just do a little bit of maintenance so that we don't have to bear that big, humongous cost that can come with comp plans and new codes, because it just always works. Right? We just do a little bit of maintenance at a time as that preventative piece.
And do you recommend, through this process, do you recommend I don't know what you would call it, it's like a maintenance, well, you said it, a maintenance process. Do you make recommendations on how do we keep it, even if it does change, documenting those changes, going through an actual approval process, getting the documents updated so that it maintains one cohesive unit versus what has happened with us? You've got some updates over here and some amendments over here, and you get your main code over here, and then you've got to check 3 different places to find out, what the process is. So do you recommend things like that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely recommend, the kind of the unified piece. And again, that can be in a true unified development code. It can still be codified, but the whole thing is restructuring all of your development regulations. Not saying what you got on the books is bad necessarily, but
no, it's bad.
Reordering it. And maybe you don't like it, maybe you want to start over. The nice thing on that is a lot of the legwork for a lot of this has already been done. And so the questions then become, which of these things do we want to regulate, which do we not?
Well, I would suggest just, and Bryce, again, you have way more experience than I do, but one of the things that I've counseled other councils to do in the past is to look at your variances, and specifically when I'm working with the P&Z board, I'll ask them, okay, what variances have you issued in the last 3 years? Where are you issuing a lot of variances? And typically it's on side yard setbacks, it's in certain areas. And that's those, in my mind, that's where you go look first. Okay, this is where we keep making exceptions. Does the rule, are these truly exceptions, or is the rule not right? Or do we need to go back and look at how we came up with that rule, and is there an additional stipulation, or is there an additional, a process we can put in place? I know, just speaking, like when Flatonia went through this, we had they had a real issue with setbacks. Setbacks was, and what we ended up doing, what we realized was where we saw the most requests for a setback was where a neighbor was not at the same, like maybe the side yard set or the front yard setback had to be 20 feet. Well, historically, there was a house that's 15 feet. Now you have a new home wanting to be built, and they're like, why do I have to be 20 feet? That's not fair. This person's here. And we rewrote the code to stipulate basically some verbiage that basically said, if you're, this is the setback unless your neighbor to the left or right or immediately next to you is closer than, and in which case it can be no less than this setback. So it allowed that wiggle room, if you will, for to address those issues, so people didn't have to come for a variance and look for that process. But it's that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Using variances as a sounding board is a very, very easy thing. You know that you're doing really, really, really well if your BOA meets once a year, and that's to approve the previous year's minutes. So, that's our deal place, is that we shouldn't need to be doing variances because there's very few things where that true legal hardship actually pops up. And so, Scott's point, if you're regularly issuing the same kinds of things, then that's here's your sign. This needs to be changed. We need to look at it. We need to make some kind of decision about it, right?
Deborah just informed me she lost.
So
it's 7:01.
Yeah.
So thank you, Bryce.
Oh, you're welcome. You're very welcome.
So on the annual review, it's just like any plan and everything. Do an annual review, type it up, print it off the computer, and then you can technically, this is what the military does, open up the regulation and you put a line through and see amendment, whatever, and that amendment's right behind it, all tracking and what year and everything.
Yeah, so with codification and everything that exists today, a lot of that already gets automated, especially with the Unified Development Code. We've got pieces together, and so we're not having tracked series of ordinances. I mean, I think y'all use Municode right now.
Yes,
You're paying them to do that for you. That's already getting codified, not an issue.
Mostly.
as far as review, I definitely encourage you to include that. One of the great things to include it with, budget. Why? Because you're already doing budget every year anyways. You just kind of lump that in and you start looking at that because you're looking at sales tax numbers, you're looking at property tax numbers, you're looking at all those things as a tax rate. Why not look and see where you're at development-wise as well? It's easy enough to kind of tweak in those conversations. If you'll bump us forward one. Now we'll get into the nitty-gritties on all of this and kind of talk through a little bit of these pieces the best that we can. So, from a lot of what we've heard so far about development and some concerns about residential density, some lot sizing concerns, quality of life, and that's a really big piece. And I'll kind of mirror Scott's plug, which is the change is coming. And so if we're going to stand here and say, don't come, don't come, don't come, we're just going to get run over by a stampede. I think the effort and energy is well spent, but spent in a better way, which is let's guide that change. To your point, let's figure out those things that make our community, and let's champion those and say, add to it. Make it better than it was. And so some other things that there may be pieces that aren't as important that we kind of let go, but we just manage those pieces that we know. The other thing to this that I kind of want to think about as you think through these site design elements is, it's a myth if you think that with the perfect regulations you'll get exactly the development you want. Development is a really complex piece that has a lot of moving parts that includes personal choice, the economy, finance, all of these different pieces that we have no control over. So the best thing that we want to think about is, do we want to keep certain things out, or do we want to keep certain things in, or a little bit of both, and what does that look like as we talk through this?
Okay.
So
one of the things you didn't, I was hoping to catch you before the meeting, and unfortunately it's my fault, I wasn't able to do that. But one of the things that I think I shared with y'all that I've experienced in the past, we went through a UDO process. It was 2 years long. It cost us a lot of money. We got it all developed. And then right after we got it developed, the state legislature, Texas state legislature, in their infinite wisdom, gutted much of what we had just developed, because they stated that basically from a construction standard that we would follow the IBC. And I think I've explained this to all of you before, that there's just very, very minimum regulations for IBC as far as building standards go. They just have to meet certain hurricane strengths, so it can be literally metal siding and that kind of thing that a person can build a home out of. So one of the things, Bryce, I just want to make sure that as we cover this, whether it's tonight or at a future meeting, that we distinguish, not just for the council, but in a public, if we have a public meeting of some kind, we make clear what we have the ability to control and what we don't. Because 10 years ago, planning was a totally different process, night and day to what it is today. What we could do as general law and home rule, especially as home rule cities, totally different. Now we really are limited. The development agreements, whether people love them or hate them, are our saving grace for this town, for this city, because it allows us to establish standards that legally we couldn't enforce. We could adopt them all we wanted, but basically they're just suggestions. I think that's a great pirate quote, right? It's not so much law, rules, as suggestions. So the development agreements actually allow us to provide teeth within reason. Again, it's that negotiation back and forth. But that's something that I'll lean into you if we talk about things. If you can just, as you talk about them without.
I've got that one specifically on the slide, and so we'll cover that piece.
Okay.
The big thing, as you'll already also know about that, is annexation laws changed substantially. Since you're not home rule, it's a little less of an issue, but it's still a big problem, because more or less at this point, the only annexations we're going to get are voluntary annexations going forward. So
well, the other thing you need to hit on is, not that it's a foregone conclusion, but something that the council I know has discussed considering is, when we hit 5,000, which is our tipping point for home rule, there is some interest and desire to pursue that.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about this, the Alsatian Oaks development by itself will tip the city over 5,000. At full development, 900 homes. That's minimum. If you said 2 people per home, that's 1,800 people. We're at 3,500 today. Just doing simple math, you're over 5,000. But we know it's not going to be 2 people per home. They're going to be considerably more.
Yeah.
So, again, just
But,
another area to
yeah,
hit.
Absolutely, and kind of the easiest way that it's always been explained to me about home rule versus general law is, in general law cities, the state says, here's what you can do, and if I didn't say you can do it, you can't. And a home rule city goes the other way, which says, here's what you can't do, and if I didn't say you can't do it, it's your choice. So there's a lot more freedoms with all kinds of things that you can do on that.
But we can plug in grandfather clauses, right? That way, if anybody turns around and goes, well, so-so, well, that person, and years ago, had their stuff.
Yeah, so in development, that concept is called non-conforming.
Okay.
Non-conforming uses, lots, and structures, and I believe you already have provisions in the books right now that deals with that at some level.
Okay.
Yes, because one of the pieces is development changes over time. We don't want to make somebody go and fix their old stuff unless they're doing certain things that would require that. Am I expanding the home? Am I tearing down, rebuilding? What's the case? Some of those are triggers. So as we kind of look at the slide, lot dimensions is an item. We've already heard that this evening. Your code does mention the 12,000 square feet. It also has an allowance that council can reduce that in certain situations. To kind of give context to the small yards comment as well, the happy answer in most situations is a variety, unfortunately. We all have our personal tastes. I know people who live in condos, don't like to live, don't want the yard at all, happy to pay somebody else to deal with all that. I've got other people who are like, you'll have to pry my deed for my land out of my cold dead hands. I'm going to live on my ranch acreage forever. Everyone should do this. They're both right? No one's wrong in this. And so as council, it's understanding we've got to have this balance. Now, what does that balance look like? That's the decision y'all get to make.
This is where I was speaking to earlier about the schizophrenia, and I don't mean to make light of anybody that actually deals with that, but it's a term to kind of to define where what we're saying today conflicts with who we are on some level. And when you look at the community, as I think we talked about 2 weeks ago, it's a tapestry. The tapestry, the fabric that makes up what is currently Castroville is made up of lots of varying sizes. They're not all 12,000 square feet. At least I'm fairly certain of that. I don't know what the new, I don't know how big the ones are at the development unit I talked about earlier today. I keep forgetting the name of it.
Westheim Village?
Westheim. Yeah, how big are those? How big is Country Village? How big is River Bluff? But I feel fairly certain that those are varying lot sizes. They aren't all 12,000. Some of them might be bigger and some of them might be smaller. But that's the point, is that, you know, we've actually lived with that. And when people when they look at the community, they like it, but it's hard to then put that into terms where, how do you make that then allowable without allowing the developer to take advantage of you, right? And just doing it everywhere. How do you build it in such a way that you're mimicking the current fabric and not just letting someone put all of the minimum requirement in?
Yeah,
right?
and like we said, it's that balance, and I would add to that, it's moderation. I can't have all humongous lots because I'll price people out. No one will be able to move into the community, at least kind of working class folk, so you'll end up bringing the entire GDP way up, and then you'll have a hard time finding the folks to work at the restaurants and the bars and all of those things because they can't pay enough.
Well, and more importantly, you can't necessarily force the developers to do it because they'll say, no, for me, this is a financial decision, and so my financial decision is I'm going to stay out of the city limits and I'm going to do whatever I want.
Yep, absolutely. And so and to that same extent, though, it's also, hey, maybe we don't want 4,000 square foot lots all next to each other. Like that, to that density piece is too much density. And so maybe this is an even easier way to think about it, is like a units per acre kind of thought, because one of the pieces that you can do with density, which developers like, because there is a cost to a linear foot of road for utilities, curbing for each home. And so as we make lots bigger, we also make them more expensive. Doesn't mean the homes that go on them are nicer. There's not a direct correlation in that, other than the land value is substantially higher. The inverse of that is as you make things too small, we get too much density that doesn't support the standards that we have for public infrastructure and roadway networks, start making traffic problems, start doing other things. There's some happy mediums that you can play with if you have a rough policy of density per acre, because you can do cluster developments where you say, hey, make this part really dense and give me big stuff over here, or even leave that as open space.
Well, and you can have design guidelines.
And have that trade-off.
specifically for high density, like, you might require alleys in the back and other things that discourage on-street parking, which is a real issue when you have higher density. I mean, there's some creative ways that the good news is we're not the first city to deal with this. And as Bryce has already spoken to, he's helped a number of cities through this process. And so we're going to lean very heavily into your experience and wisdom on some of these issues.
And I think the way that y'all could currently sets it up, you're kind of set up for lot area, lot width, lot depth. And those things, the way your code's currently set up is a good way to kind of convert some of those regulations into development agreements, because as things come in for review, I'm pretty sure in your development agreement you'll have it on pull building permits for homes and things like that for the city. So it's easier for staff to review when they know what they're looking at, and there's no reason to kind of reinvent the wheel on those pieces, but more so take the concepts that you want and we can turn those into appropriate.
Did you get a chance to review the Alsatian Oaks development agreement?
I didn't review it all.
Okay. I believe it is on the website.
Okay.
And I'll make sure you get a copy.
So I guess to that point, are there any thoughts or ideas on
any of these three items?
On any of these items that we've got up so far? Lot dimensions, what you want to see, kind of giving you a rough piece at 12,000 square foot lots. You're realistically at maybe 3 to 3 1/4 units per acre, because we've got to take out right away out of that some other pieces, some drainage normally, and so that's what that number will compute to. Are you happy with that? Looking to go more? Looking to go less? I know it's kind of an arbitrary statement that I'm kind of putting you all on the spot on.
I just think it's a feasibility issue. I don't know that we could defend it or make it work or encourage development with that in place.
Yeah, so I will tell you that most of the home builders that I'm dealing with regularly are not building 12,000 square foot lots. They're wanting 10 or smaller. Most of them are wanting 5 to 6. Now, I think how big's your Alsatian Oaks? Did you say how many units they have coming in roughly?
900.
900, yeah. I don't think you want 900 5,000 square foot lots.
Well, and they've got, really,
So
Hondo's
4,000
dealing,
square foot
y'all
lots.
probably read the paper, Hondo's dealing with this right now. I think they have a 200-acre development that they wanted 900 on 200 acres.
Wow.
I don't even know how you do that. And I don't know if this is just hearsay or rumor, but that someone told me that they were actually doubling that number, which, again, I really don't know how you do that. That's a bunch of double wides.
Yeah.
It's just,
They were
I don't know.
talking 40-foot lots.
Yeah,
Yeah.
40-foot lot.
Still do it in the.
Military housing,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
basically
know.
what it is, military
So,
housing.
yes, you can have an overload, but a good mix.
You can pay for it with the extra.
There's something else I want to ask about, but I'll be honest, I think some of this, I don't know how much we can talk about through tonight. I think one of the things, Bryce, you're doing is hopefully, I think Poirot would talk about, stirring the gray cells, the little gray cells. So you're stirring do you like Poirot? The little gray cells, you're making us think about some of this stuff. One of the things I do think we need to talk about is multifamily. I don't know, I really don't know clearly what everybody's opinion is on that. I would like to know, because I think, anyway, I'd just like to know. I'd like to throw that out there and see.
Yeah, so let's hit that. We've got up here as land use. So one of the pieces that y'all previously considered and discussed was requiring some amount of developments to be commercial, potentially even mixed use at a 10 to 15% amount, especially on your, the larger pieces that are wanting to come in.
Well, I think that, in the interest of time and proper planning, I think it's probably best for us to set up something where none of us are land use designers. We're not used to building cities. We're not used to looking out for what needs to be looked out for. So I think part of this is going through a workshop where we walk through that and you talk about the benefits of doing one versus the other and help us through that process, because right now we have a lot of disparate ideas. We have anecdotal examples of things that have been popular or unpopular, things that we personally prefer. But I think that walking through that process, in looking at it as an all-encompassing, the example, so Scott at one point says, you know, you got to watch out for traffic volume. And the other point, I want to know where you stand with multi-use, and those go hand in hand. So it's finding those compromises, finding those potential pitfalls is my biggest concern. What are the pitfalls if you do it like this versus another way? So I think that this is best through an actual workshop, and I think this is kind of what we're discussing, is how do we go through this? So it's all really, really good information, and I think it's good things to stir the gray matter.
A little gray stuff.
Sure. Well, if you'll excuse me, I'll stir your gray matter just a tad bit more, and just run you through a couple other things, just to know that they exist and something to think about. So subdivision design elements. This is the biggest area that you can control what you want the physical environment to end up looking like. So I've put up here a couple things, right? So walkable neighborhoods is an important thing to the community. Walkable neighborhoods does not go hand in hand with auto-oriented, curvilinear suburban development, where everybody wants a cul-de-sac. We want these broad, curving streets, things like that. They're very difficult to get around on a pedestrian. Whereas, like, the core of your city that's gridded out in a traditional fused grid, that's much more walkable. You also avoid a bunch of your cul-de-sac issues, things like that. Those are standards that we can code into your regulations to make it very difficult or even prohibit certain things. So that's a relevant piece in this. Access management's always important, especially in subdivisions as we think through things like this, requiring multiple points of access, especially on smaller subdivisions. So fire code doesn't make you put a second point of access into a residential subdivision until you get a fair amount of units. I want to say it's over 30. Whereas you can adopt a local piece to say, hey, we want at least 2 points of access all the time. Also, we don't want island subdivisions, so in those areas where we have floodplains, one of your 2 points of access has to be elevated above the 100-year floodplain. We don't want to be using city services to evacuate people during bad storms. It also increases connectivity, right? We can force people to stub to adjacent property and also accept those streets. So we create that connectivity without having to master plan everything. The other things that you've got on streets is obviously cul-de-sac widths. That's very much a controllable thing that the city can set in their subdivision regulations. Like I said, stub streets for that continuation of streets so that we make sure our neighborhoods are connected to each other. Sometimes residents are not always happy about that. At the end of the day, it makes everything kind of work better, and traffic also work better. And then you all had previously discussed a little bit about irrigated green space, and I believe a lot of this is kind of towards the public right-of-way section for that beautification and aesthetics piece, especially on your gateways coming into the community. I think that's a great idea. Then we've also got public utilities, right? This is something that's completely in the wheelhouse of the city, both the standards that we hold ourselves to for current rebuilds and maintenance, but also the things that we want to see in new development. So all underground, for example, I think that's been brought up before, fiber internet to homes, as well as improving the light standards that we have for street signs, light poles, traffic signals, etc., into something that's a little higher. To that push-pull and that continuum, there's a higher cost to the developer to put those things in. Hey, maybe that's fine. There's also going to be a higher cost in the city's budget to do maintenance and replacement on those. So maybe it's not right everywhere, but only in certain areas of the city as we want to try to create branding and theme and that cohesive community feel. Lighting, dark sky lighting, I think it's a really fantastic, admirable thing to do. Even if you only adopt certain portions of it, like hooded and shielded. The other one that I know is in there a lot that I haven't seen as many communities do is color temperature of the lights, right? So we get the more orange pieces and not that 6,000 K, daylight color that comes down out of the industrial places or maybe some of the car complexes. This just seems out of place. Additionally, residential design. So there's certain things that we can do. As Scott had mentioned, and I've got up here kind of start out, state law really is tied everyone's hands, and we can't regulate materials which are listed in the last 3 model code editions, which is pretty much everything. So I can tell you in the 2020 edition of the IBC, they've added shipping containers and how to actually convert them to be used structurally. So that's in the code now. So make a shipping container home. Can't say no.
Wow.
My recommendation, I've done a lot of work with aesthetics and trying to regulate buildings. And what I found is it doesn't matter how stringent you make your code, If somebody wants to build an ugly building, by golly, they will build an ugly building.
Well, and ugly is all the guy that hold it.
It is.
Well, I would say you mentioned shipping containers. When I was in a former city, we had a development group, and it was these two entrepreneurs basically, and that's what they wanted to do. They were going to start building shipping container homes for people who wanted them. And you think there's not that many people out there, but it just takes 1% of any population, and that's still a lot of homes. That's still a lot of what many people would consider ugly. But again, to the people who don't see it that way, they love it. They think it's wonderful. They think it's the best thing since sliced bread. So, yeah, it's you might not think it's an issue. You might think no one would ever do that. Here to tell you, never say never.
And to that point, right, which is, to the point of aesthetics, to the point of the rest of what we've talked about, the true answer is this combination of things, because just because you don't like it doesn't mean someone else doesn't. And I think that the way that we preserve community and the integrity of the community through this is to identify those pieces and those things that make, the community what it is historically, in modern times, etc. Make that our city policy. Turn those things and say, this is what we want to see. We want to champion these things. We're going to brand our city this way. We're going to brand our signage and our public-facing right-of-way, especially in the downtown areas, this, so that any visitors who come by know exactly where they're at, right? I mean, pick your favorite other city that's not Capperville, and why do you like it? And what areas of that town do you like? Most of the time it's, hey, there's the downtown. Everybody loves Fredericksburg. That one comes up all the time. Well, yeah, going back to Fredericksburg 20 years ago, it didn't look like what it looks like today. And they also have crazy development challenges. You think that y'all are getting a big push on this stuff? They've had even crazier things happen. And it's because when you're successful as a community, people want to come live there. And so you're kind of your own worst enemy, unfortunately. But again, I think that the best way and the advice that I would give to y'all is champion who you are and encourage that growth and guide it in a productive way. And you'll be able to come out the other side of it even stronger than you are today, with stronger community ties, with better participation, with that good feel that has drawn you all to live here. So, with that, I'm open to any questions that you've got, commentary, etc.
I think my biggest question is, what are our next steps?
Well, so the UDC, I know this is something we're all interested in. I think it would be very, very helpful for the community to have. I think it would have been even more helpful for us to have 2 or 3 years ago. The fact that we're doing a lot through the development agreement, it really kind of takes the place of the UDC, but it doesn't negate the importance of needing one and having one. The next step, I think,
and I kind of disagree with that, because part of this is the process of community involvement.
I said it doesn't take this step. Which part are you disagreeing with?
The development agreements, yes, it gives us the opportunity to control some of that, but what it doesn't do is give us that community input. For them to say, okay, so you're
that's an excellent point.
Regulating the right stuff, you're asking for the right stuff, you're keeping away the wrong stuff.
That's weird that you talk about inclusiveness.
Yeah.
No, you're the one that, honestly, you always remind me of that very important value that you obviously hold, which is making sure the community has a say in all of this. And you're absolutely right. I think that's one reason why this is important. It opens up that channel. And like I said, I think it also addresses who we really are and makes us, it gives us a little bit more integrity when we're talking to the developers, because we're actually saying, no, this isn't just what's good for thee, it's what's good for everyone. And this is what we're coming to some consensus. So what's the next step? What would you, I'm going to put that to you, Bryce. What do you think we should do next?
So I will say that in my experience and running through code updates and things like that, it is an expensive process that needs to be budgeted for. I'm happy to work up an estimate for you all and kind of get that over to you. That is a service we do offer. I would also ask, I guess, for some direction on that of, are you happy with your comprehensive plan? Are you interested in an update on that as well?
Well, let me talk to you a little about this. So one of the things that we talked about, I remember us talking about prior to this meeting, we were going to touch with the council, is one of the things I would love to be able to do is take someone else's UDO and say, okay, this city did it, they figured it out, let's copy that more or less and put it over Castroville. But we have tried as staff to try and find something that might be appropriate. And even when we find a city that we think is somewhat comparable, so Bernie or Katy, Texas, or some of these other places that experience a lot of growth that were just on the outside of a larger community. So think of Buda, Texas, and some of these other places. Every community is so unique. It really is. Like, there are some items you can copy, but not much. Like, you might be able to pull in about 15% of what they have, but there's still 85% of the work you're going to have to do. So, unfortunately, I really don't think that that's very realistic to try and expect us to do something like to shortcut that process. That was my naive thought early on, but the more Brianna and I kind of started to compare and look at codes, I don't see that happening. So I wanted to mention that because I do think the next step is, okay, how serious we are about this. When you say it's expensive, you want to give us a sticker shock? What does it run typically? I know what I spent at a previous city that took 2 years, but I don't know that's.
What did you
relevant.
spend? What did you spend?
No, no. That's not how that works, Bryce.
Okay, so it's all dependent. It really is. It's dependent on the scope of what you want done and how much. And that, to Scott's point, the most important piece, ironically, is also the most expensive piece, which is community engagement. It's very labor intensive to organize, collect the data, and then distill the data into usable pieces. Because when I start asking people, hey, what do you like about these things, or start collecting that data, I get a million different answers, right? And so the team has to basically sort through all of these things, create like buckets of stuff, and then disseminate that into a collective understanding of this is what we've generally heard.
I think one of the things that we desperately need is a land use plan. When you asked about the comprehensive plan, I would like to know your answer on that. But from an administrative point of view, our perspective, I think our land use plan needs to be relooked at from the comprehensive plan. The rest of the plan. I mean, we've talked about this in the past. Like, I don't know how realistic it was in the first place because depending on which one you're looking at, a lot of it was like students and others that came in and had these wonderful ideas, and that's what they are. They're just kind of ideas. They were never funded. I don't know how much support there was for the community for them. But certainly, if we're looking at our budget and we're looking at the end result, I think the zoning map or the future land use plan is one element that would definitely need to be looked at and redone.
And I think a good way for us to look at this is to take the ones that have already been developed, because for the most part, I think that a lot of people spent a lot of time, I think with one exception, a lot of people spent a lot of time and the thing was mostly copied. Aside from that one, I think that a lot of it was heavy community involvement. So I think if we start with that and say, maybe it's a study of that and say, okay, so this is what's incorporated here, this is what's left out of here. So we start with what has already been, it's already been out there.
And I think there is a distillation. I've read too many plans, but I think there's a distillation, like an explanation, a distilled version of the comprehensive plan at the beginning of the comprehensive plan, if I'm not mistaken. Right? I think they kind of did a pretty good job of saying, here's what this plan is and what it entails.
The summary.
And and maybe just reviewing that and making sure that as we. Again, I'm interested to think.
Sure.
Would you think zoning first? Because I kind of feel like you do the CZO, like you review your zoning ordinance first, and then you look to see, okay, once you go through that process, is it compatible or incompatible with the comprehensive plan? Does that make sense?
Yes. So here is the suggestion that I have based on some of the feedback that I've been hearing from everyone thus far. If we're not super thrilled about where our comprehensive plan is, if no one is reading it, if it's not being used, then it's not doing us any good service. Doesn't mean it's bad, doesn't mean we should throw it away. We should always learn from everything that we've done in the past.
Well, and there was a significant effort, and I know I've been reminded of that many times.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I'm going to put my 2 cents in here, and all of my colleagues in the planning field probably hate me. I'm not a fan of the way that traditional comprehensive plans are done, because they're about this thick, and there's about this much actual useful information in them that you're going to regularly use. And so through my experience of sitting through like a decade worth of public meetings and hearing councils go off and go through the budgeting process and all of that, I said, hey, isn't there a better way to do this? We love to do strategic plans. We love to do these 5-year visioning things. We can contemplate that. Why don't we turn our comprehensive plan into that, where we're regularly relooking at it? It doesn't need demographic projections for the next 20 years. Guess what? The census already kind of gives us that stuff, right? We've already got a lot of that information. It doesn't need to be distilled down in that way. But instead give you a functional plan that intertwines with your budget work plan that you can be reviewing as you review budgets, because one of the most important pieces of the comprehensive plan is, here's how we make this vision a reality. Well, that's great if you have an unlimited amount of money,
Right.
time and effort and staff, but we don't. And so you can do a fraction of that.
And really, there's two elements. There's the CIP, which we've recently adopted, and we're funding, and we're doing our best to fund, which has very limited ability to affect anything on the general fund side from a funding standpoint, and a less limited but still limited ability to affect it on the utility side, because the need on the utility side is in the hundreds of millions, and we're only able to touch a fraction of that. But it's still a lot more than the utility fund can spend. The second way that gets done is through development. And so, thoughtfully thinking about, okay, what is a city, from a master plan process, what can we actually realistically fund and do in the next 5 years as part of a comprehensive plan? And what can we expect or try to leverage our development agreements and our partnerships with the community to get done? And that means, all the different varieties of partnership. It could be foundations and grants and private development and
But I think we start with
agreements and all that.
we start with what's in front of us. The biggest danger in front of us is what's coming at us from the east. That is within somewhat of our control. So I think that if we concentrate there, I mean, we're going to have to do this in phases anyway. So we started off with what do we do with what do we tell the new developers that are coming in about mixed use, about street sizes, about density, about stub outs, about all of the rest of that stuff. I think that's where we need the most help, is to give them guidance. When they plop down a thing in front of you that says, I got this many 40-foot lots, and we're going to do it 3 stories tall, and so we're going to have all this traffic that comes. How do we deal with that? And then the other thing is, part of traffic, I really believe, is that having the services here that we need in terms of commercial services, grocery stores, shopping, the other stuff, so that people don't have to leave, so that we're not necessarily a speed bump on your way west. So how do we incorporate some of that stuff so that people that are here have the services that they need, so they don't, I don't like leaving. I'll be honest with you. I like staying in Castroville if I can. Don't want it to become a big metropolis for sure, but it's a lot nicer if you can start planning this out and saying, set aside some of the space so that we can be able to do that. That's my thought.
So, in my mind, I see, if possible, send us the plans and ordinances. That way we can go through it, and any questions or anything that pops up, or, this is a little dated and everything, since we're going to be asking the public to look at it too, to give their input. I mean, that's the first thing that I think we should do.
Well, and I think that we put it to figuring out we've got to find out what the budget, we've got to figure out what the initial scope is. And I think that we do need help with going through and reviewing those and finding out what's missing from that. I think that we start with that. Say, based on what you've got for our ETJ, specifically for our CCN, these are the components that are missing from it. If we start with that, and you've been through this a lot more, so I continue to look at you because you've got...
That's right, you're looking at me and I'm looking at Bryce. So Bryce was starting to say how he doesn't agree with his fellows about how they do the comprehensive planning process, and you have kind of a little more of a surgeon's approach to it.
A functional layperson's piece, right? At the end of the day, I think that the planning work that you all need is things that everyone can understand.
Yep.
It's not things that you need to hire specialists to interpret for you. Joe homeowner off the street is not going to understand all the legalese portions of the code or some of the technical things relating to commercial development. But by golly, they need to understand, if they want to put their own shed in, what do I need to do to put a shed in? And those things should be clear, concise, very well written that way. I take a very practical approach to development because of that. That's who ultimately ends up reading a lot of this stuff. And so I would recommend that kind of piece and that kind of approach to a lot of this. Again, if you're looking at even just kind of facelifting parts of the comp plan, I think that effort is good to go ahead and do because you can get a lot of the public engagement, and while they're in, we can ask them a lot of coding questions as well, because the things that you don't ask the public is, which way do you like this regulation to be worded? Like, that's what you put on the professionals you hire to figure out for you, is how to make it simple and not complex. What you ask them is, hey, here are these scenarios, here are these situations, how does that make you feel? Do you like A or B better? Here's some pictures, things like that. That works in well a lot with the comprehensive plan goals, which are things like, what do you want to see this area of town be like in the future? And what's your favorite part of town? What don't you like about the community? These very broad, open-ended, like, discussion questions that we do at roundtables and things like that for community engagement that really dig into that deeper level, because, you know, a lot of what y'all have said this evening is, yeah, there's certain subdivisions we like, but when I'm in there, I can't tell you exactly what it is I like about it. I just like it. And it's really hard for the untrained person to know that. That's where planners get to specialize, is knowing what questions to ask you to dissect and figure out, oh, it's this thing that you like. It's the fact that it's not a garage door, a front door, and that's the end of the house. But there's some visual appeal, there's some interest. It's laid out in a way where it doesn't feel like it's just a continuous running block for 60 houses worth or something like that, right? Like, those are those things that I'm trained into that I can ask questions about to dissect what it is you actually like about that community.
Okay. So I think that maybe the best way to do this is for you to get with him and figure out what are, and it's stuff that we can work with you on.
What I'll do is talk about scopes. I think, again, I said it before, I think looking at the land use plan, in my mind, the design elements, so what you're talking about is speaking to the east and what's happening there. Well, I think the great way to do that is kind of what we're trying to do tonight, but to develop with the community, doing a community engagement piece on what are the design elements that the city is looking for, and where are those appropriate. To your earlier point, you can't do it everywhere because it would become probably unbearable for the community to sustain, because it's even though you're putting on the backs of the developer here, well, you might want to mimic some of that downtown, for instance, with the nice slides and that kind of thing, but would it be appropriate to go back into every neighborhood and do that? And if so, there's going to be a tax implication at some point, because the cost of maintenance is pretty high. So having those level of discussions, I think, and then seeing where, I think there needs to be a review of our comp plan, looking at that process. So paying you as a planner to go through and really look through how that was developed. I will tell you, having read it, again, they were very thorough. Not only did they go through, I think it was, a 14-year process or something crazy. Like, there was a very long process initially, and then they went through another update. And they did a really good job in the document of kind of documenting the public pieces that happened and the feedback. And you actually, I believe the back of the document has some of those items in it. So from your perspective, we don't have to go back and ask some of those questions. You can actually see the questions that were asked and what the responses were and how they rated them, and then how that folded back into the plan. So none of that stuff's already there. The question for me is, how accurately does that reflect what we're hearing today about the development that's taking place to our east? And going back to that, what if this is what we wanted then, do we still want it? And how do we want to impose that, not just on ourselves, but on future development? Clear as mud?
Clear as mud.
Excellent.
There's mud.
I think we can work out something in the next couple of weeks that would really distill this down to something that's actionable.
A scope.
A scope, right.
Okay.
Well, and it's a scope of stages, because if we do everything, it's a multi-year process. You got to start at some time.
Well, the good news is from the CIP process, we did budget some money for a downtown development, as you may recall. I just plugged in a pretty big round number. He still hasn't told us what his cost is, so I'm not going to tell what mine was. But
we didn't know what our scope is.
Right. So as we get that scope, we do have a amount of money plugged in for planning, knowing that there would be some planning involved. So that's kind of why that was there. So that's probably what we would do, is repurpose that money for downtown planning towards something like this effort. And then when we issue the new bonds, we can do downtown planning if that's something that people want to pursue.
Absolutely. Is everybody comfortable with that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Great. Thank you for coming down. This is great information.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. All right. Do you have anything else on that?
That was an hour and 20 minutes.
Thanks.
No, it was an hour and 10, an hour and 11 minutes. Just like I say, it was an hour and 10, an hour and 11, yeah. But that's not your fault. I think it was a good discussion, and Bryce, I really think you did a great job, so thank you.
Yes.
So the next item is on future agenda items. One thing I want to point out, if you go onto the city's SharePoint site, under the council, there is a document in there that says future agenda draft. So it's got all of the things that we're looking at.
It's called working documents, I think.
In working documents. You want to just send out the main link to that?
I'll send out 2 links. There's a link to the agenda,
Agenda pending list.
the pending list. So that's just a Word document, and that's where we put things. If you have an item that you think needs to be on a future agenda, by all means, put it on there. You still have to get the mayor's approval for it, but that'll be a way to communicate with the mayor and myself and staff. And then the other item is that working docs folder, and I'll send you a link to that. This meeting was the first meeting where we imposed that. Those documents became available Monday of last week. So even though you don't get the full packet, they are working documents. So there might be some errors in there, misspellings, misinformation, not completely wrong, but some things that might be slightly off. So just know that they are working documents, but that'll give you early, if you start to have some questions or issues, I think Herb's going to love this. You can start earlier. You can start looking at that folder before the packet's even ready.
And just trying, this is something, again, I got to commend you for continuing to do this.
You told me to do it.
Well, I appreciate you continuing to do it, so that we're providing information as early as possible. It's too hard to be able to, what I've seen in previous years was, shows up on the dais, you got to make a decision on it right now, and you had 5 minutes to look it over. And so we want to make sure that you've got plenty of time to dig into it, talk to the people that you represent, and so this is just another effort, and staff has been doing a great job under Scott's leadership in getting us to that
Under the mayor's
point.
leadership.
And so it is getting to that point where we can, and this is cooperation. We're all trying to figure out how to accomplish more in a less amount of time and be able to do it very, very thoroughly and get out of here before 7:44. Okay. Did anybody else want to talk about any future agenda items, or you want to go try out the new process?
Well, yeah, we do new process, but I'd like an update on projects that we've been having going on. Give us an update, please.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Any last request?
No, sir.
You'll have to do the rest through your representative.
Amelia, I should mention, I think Amelia is almost done. Is it Amelia? I think it's Amelia. The county was out there.
They were grading yesterday.
Yeah, so they're doing a lot of work, and I think there's the chip seal and stuff's coming in. That's a county job. County's going to be doing some more work. All this was, given to you in that streets presentation, but on future agenda, our future items, we have the game this weekend, the baseball game on Friday, so just remember, if you know anybody that wants to go, tickets are for sale in 208. If they work for a board or commission, they can come for free. And there was something else, but escapes me. As far as an agenda item. Was there something future that was coming up?
All right. So unless there's anything else, we are adjourned at 7:45.
Thank you all.
Great. Thanks.